starting this channel was that I wanted to share how excited I was about the Dutch language to all the other people that live here and don't speak Dutch. The number of expats and foreigners that have moved here and live here for 5, 10 plus years and still don't speak Dutch blows my mind. And I will be honest, that happened a lot more often in Amsterdam than it does here living in The Hague. But still, why would you not want to do it? I've had so much fun discovering this language, and I thought I would share with you my exact story, the exact resources I used, the timeline, everything that I did, so that you guys can implement some of these strategies and start learning Dutch too. So I get the question, why Dutch? Why would you learn Dutch? I mean, apart from the fact that I live here, but then people ask, why do you live here? I met my Dutch partner traveling Australia, and long story short, we ended up moving back to the Netherlands. I love it here. It feels like my home. And I know from the time that we were traveling together, I was already semi-interested in learning the language. I'd heard a lot of conversations that he would have with his family, and I would not understand anything. And it just intrigued me to want to know what they were talking about, how they were communicating with each other, and I guess sort of feel like I belonged in their family also. So we very much built a foundation of only speaking English with each other in the beginning. And I think that that's a really key thing that you need to switch around, is having that one person who will persevere with you, have the patience, and keep speaking Dutch with you no matter what. Whether that's a teacher, whether that's your partner, whether it's a really good friend of yours that also speaks Dutch, but having someone to motivate you on those days where you don't feel motivated is absolutely necessary. So at this stage, we are traveling around Asia. I am not surrounded by the language. I have one person with me that speaks Dutch, and he at that time was not speaking Dutch to me. We were, like I said, completely communicating in English. Towards the end of our trip in Asia, I knew that we were moving to the Netherlands. I knew that I had to start taking my Dutch interest a little bit more seriously if I actually wanted to learn the language. So the very, 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 very first thing that I did was purchase a flashcard deck from Fluent Forever. I've talked about them before. I love, love, love these flashcards. So this was a flashcard deck that would teach me the sounds of Dutch language and kind of the pronunciation rules and spelling rules. So it gives you these short letter combinations, and it will show you how that is pronounced. This was the very first thing I started doing. So I would just listen and get a feel, I guess, for how the language sounded. I think that this was key to me setting a really good foundation for not having such a strong accent now. I still have an accent, but it's not really strong because I started with sounds. I didn't start with words, and I didn't start guessing how I thought that words were meant to be said. I started on the right way. I started with sounds. The next thing I did was make my own flashcards. So again, I used a list from Fluent Forever, and it is always in the description in any one of my videos. It is the amazing word list something. Anyway, it's in the description. And this list is about 650 words, roughly. It is in English. Now, the trick with this list is to make your own flashcards, but you only grab an image and the Dutch word. So you are translating this list into Dutch, and then you're grabbing images that your brain can associate with the word, and you're putting it all together. This again was key to cutting English out. My brain was learning to associate this image with a brand new word that I hadn't learned before. So I think after a while, making these cards, I was still in Asia. I'm still cycling during the day, and I would come home, and whether we were camping in our tent that night or we were staying in a hostel, I would make these flashcards. I would find images on Google, and then at the end of about a month, I think I had my 650 words. So making them yourself is the best way to learn them. It is really time consuming and it is really tedious, but making them yourself will be the best thing that you can do. If you do not have time to make them yourself, I have my flashcards in the description below. I recommend that you make them yourself, just so you know. But if you don't, the link is in the description. So once I had made all my flashcards, I was practicing them every day, and I mean every day. So I was looking at these cards, I was looking at these words and these images in Dutch. It's only 650 words, but you'll be surprised how many sentences you can make once you've got these 650 words. So the next thing I started doing was writing sentences using the words that I had learned. So whether this was trying to describe the day that I had had, today I ate breakfast. I mean, like super, super basic, simple sentences about what I had done, trying to use the words that I was learning in my flashcard decks. So I didn't stop doing the flashcards. I just added on top. So you'll notice that the whole time I'm adding layers of how I was studying, the more comfortable I got with the language. So I'm making sentences and I'm trying to glue these words together. Here is a clip of me while we were still in China, trying to glue these words in my best Dutch at the time.
Waar gaan we morgen naartoe dan?
Morgen, we gaan naar Tjouwen. De trein gaat voor bijna 15 uur.
20?
20 uur. Nee, echt?
Dat wel.
Before we get into the rest of the video, I'd like to give a shout out to today's sponsor, who is Skillshare. Skillshare, as you might know, is an online learning platform. They have thousands of creative classes and you can learn how to upskill, and there's a massive choice. I cannot express this enough. One of the very first classes that I tried on Skillshare was a class by Dylan Mirsvensky, and it was illustrating flowers and arranging bouquets in Photoshop. And I had never done this before. And the class was so interesting because she takes you right from the start, from drawing on paper to digitizing and manipulating your image later. And I had never done that before, and I've been able to apply those skills to other projects. So the way I see Skillshare is that it allows me to have this downtime that's like kind of creative, but then I also take those skills and I'm able to use them at work, or I'm able to use them in YouTube videos. So I think for me, it's been a massive win being able to use Skillshare. There's no ads on Skillshare, which is also one of my favorite things about it. So if you are interested to see what you can learn from Skillshare, if you use the link in my description, you will get a whole month free trial and then less than $10 a month. And now we can get back into the video. Listening back to this now, I can hear that I'm very much still using an English grammar structure. I hadn't even started really picking apart the grammar. I was just picking these words and trying to talk about myself. So really trying to swap my brain over into Dutch mode. My pronunciation is bad, my speed is bad, but it was a start. And I wasn't ashamed because I also wasn't around Dutch people. And I think that kind of helped, because I know that when I first got to the Netherlands, I was really worried about people judging me and judging how bad I was. Whereas when we were in China, who speaks Dutch in China? Like no one. So I could make mistakes and my partner could laugh at me and I could laugh at me. But I was kind of felt like I was in a safe language environment. The Chinese people didn't know that I was making mistakes in Dutch because it was a foreign language for them and they didn't understand it. So I almost feel like starting to learn Dutch not in the Netherlands was a really good way to have a base to go from once I got here. So while I'm writing these sentences, I'm practicing my spelling, I'm adding new words to my vocabulary, so I'm having to look up words that I hadn't learned in my flashcard deck. So with my 650 word foundation, I'm starting to really expand my vocabulary into things that I'm interested to talk about. This is probably when I really started getting more interested in the grammar structure. So I would take a really basic form of grammar, something like subject, verb, object. I ran to the shops. I ran to the park. I ran to my house. So I was kind of doing these plug and play sentences, and I would write like 20 of them a day. It is the most boring and tedious thing you can do, but it really cemented which word order to put these items into. And I was recalling on those 650 words that I had learned. I was practicing my spelling because I was writing random sentences before that. So again, these are layers. I started with sounds, and then I went up to words, and then I built up to sentences, and then I started tackling grammar. So when I was doing these grammar sentences, I wasn't doing the sound flashcards anymore. So I think once I was adding new steps, some of these lower things that I felt really, really comfortable with now could kind of fall away. I was starting to practice my audio, practicing listening. So I was jumping on and watching those random cooking videos by the Albert Heijn. And I had no idea at the time what Albert Heijn was, but they have these like kid cooking shows that are on YouTube, and I thought they were great. I know that a lot of people say you should use Peppa Pig and use children's shows and cartoons to learn languages, but it's just not for me. I can't get into it. I can't break down the language as much. So I think watching things that interested me, like cooking videos, I used to watch things like yoga videos because I knew that they talked about body parts and I knew that they talked about directions. So I was very deliberate about what I listened to make sure that I was adding to my vocabulary. So I think having this tactic and being a little bit smart about the type of audio or the type of content that you expose yourself to can really influence how quickly you pick up the language. The great thing about these cooking videos is that they would talk about ingredients and food groups, and they would add verbs while they were doing things. So someone saying, we're going to chop the onions. They would say that while they were chopping. So I could really associate the words that I was hearing with what I was seeing on the screen. And that's not something that you really get from movies or TV series. So I think that being able to watch these more informative or like how-to videos in my target language, which was Dutch, really helped my brain make these connections of which words actually have meaning. So I'm still doing flashcards with my 650 words. I'm still writing sentences every day. And now I'm adding in my audio and practicing listening to things. So again, these words that I'm hearing, I'm also adding into those new sentences that I'm writing up every day. Okay, so now we arrive in the Netherlands. I had said to my partner months before this, I'm serious about learning Dutch. I really want to do it. I really want to be able to get the most from the culture and our experience living back in the country. I'm really serious about this. And the first thing he asked me was, are you sure? And I said, yes, 100%. How could I not be? This is going to be the funnest thing ever. Day one, no more English, none. That was it. He only spoke Dutch to me from day one. And my first few weeks, my first few months were the most confusing and hardest and fast-paced things that I have ever experienced. It was intense. And looking back on that time now, it was helpful. It really sped up my learning curve, and I was full on thrown in the deep end. But I also think that language learning should be fun, and it wasn't at that time. It was really, really difficult, and I was really incredibly hard on myself. I am a perfectionist, and I was almost had put such high expectations on myself that I refused to speak English, even when I was in moments of difficulty or really trying to socialize. I was brand new in a country. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends, and yet I still refused to speak English. And I think that's a little ridiculous. I probably should have just let myself speak English, but I just wanted to not be one of those expats that was living in Amsterdam and not speaking Dutch. Like, I just had this image of my head that I did not want to be that person, that I had to try even harder to not be that person. So with my foundation and being in the country and having these crazy expectations of myself, I used every single opportunity to practice my Dutch. Every time I met someone new, I only ever introduced myself in Dutch. I would always reply in Dutch, even if people spoke English to me, and I would go to the market every day and practice having these really basic conversations with people. How much is this? Okay, yes, I want a bag. These really small encounters that you have are the perfect opportunity to practice new words and practice your confidence speaking. I'm still writing sentences. I'm not doing my flashcards anymore. I was really at a point where I was expanding my vocabulary on like another level. It was crazy. It was so fast and so intense. Here I have one of the very first books that I read in Dutch. So I moved into a house where I only live with Dutch people, which really helped. I got a job at a cafe, and again, only Dutch people worked there. So I was surrounding myself with non-English speakers and people to really immerse myself in the Dutch environment. So this is the first book that I ever read. And when I first opened it up, I had no idea what I was reading. There are notes all over this, scribbles all through it. It is completely drawn all over. It's crazy. There are new words, there are underlines, there are like just these random things written in the margin. I had this book all the time on me, all the time. I had this book in my bag. So the first half of the book, I was like, what is this? Like, what am I reading? And as you read each chapter, you're practicing everyday life, you're getting confident speaking to people, you're watching Dutch TV. I got faster and faster. I mean, this book took me literally months to read. Like, what is this? This is so many notes. And I remember the feeling of finishing this book and really understanding the story. And I had never been so proud of myself. I thought, this is amazing. I just read a complete novel in a completely different language, and maybe I didn't understand every word, but I knew what happened. I knew who died. I knew who lived. I knew the story. I knew the main character. And I'm telling you, it is the best feeling in the world. And if you are at a stage where you think like, how can I measure how good I'm getting? Because I know that sometimes it's really difficult to see your progress, especially when you're doing the same thing all the time. I'm having a book and working your way through it is the best measure of being able to see if you're getting any better. Is the book getting easier? Are you reading it quicker? Are you understanding more of the story, the nuances, the jokes, the slang? All of those things are written in books. So I'm not a massive reader, but I highly recommend getting your hands on a book and going for it. Here is another clip of me 4 weeks after being in the Netherlands. So this is probably the progress that I made, in that first 4 weeks, remembering that I already had a kind of a foundation of the basics before I entered the country.
En wat gaan we dan nog meer doen vandaag?
Wel, ik zoek voor een witte t-shirt. Want ik heb een bootfeest vanavond. En ik heb een nieuwe rok gekocht. Ja. Het is groen met roze en witte stripjes.
Ik denk dat de gele t-shirt beter is.
Nee, ik denk een beetje... Ja.
Ghetto, is toch vet?
Nee, ik denk niet. Als ik er niet een witte t-shirt van vind, misschien ik een gele
t-shirt dragen.
Ja.
I love seeing these clips of me when I first arrived because I think the way that I speak very confidently, but I'm also making 100 million mistakes. I can hear them now and I'm like, what are you even saying? Like, how did people even have the patience to want to talk with you? And I can hear that I'm not conjugating the verb correctly. I'm still using bits and pieces of English grammar structures. So this is where I was at 4 weeks afterwards. And I'm still proud of how far I had come in 4 weeks. There was still a long, long way to go before I really felt comfortable in the language. Once you get over that initial beginner's hump, I think your excitement is enough to keep you motivated. It's that really initial, maybe like the first few weeks, it's still really exciting and it's still motivating because you're learning so much. And then you hit this wall where you're like, am I really getting better? Am I ever going to be able to speak the language? Am I ever going to feel comfortable in a new language? Once you get over that hump and you realize that it's achievable and it's possible, and testing out different study methods that work for you and things that work with your schedule, things that work with the way that you learn, learning about how you as a person learn is also really valuable. So I hope that some of these techniques, I hope that this story has helped try and inspire you to learn Dutch language. If you have any questions about more resources or things that I might be able to help with, let me know in the comments below and I will see you in the next video. Bye.